How you doing? Welcome back. What we're going to do, we're going to make some deck chairs. I've got an old sample over here with my prototype. But the first step in the deck chair is making the armrests. I start with the 2x6 and I've got this jig. And I'll zoom in on that and let you see what's going on. This is the finished shape. This is the pattern for the armrest. And we've got a few cuts to make. We have a tapered edge on this side. And the front of this armrest, compared to the rear of the armrest, it's offset 1.5 inches. So as it comes out of the chair, it turns in 1.5 inches. And that works well for my design. So the first two cuts are this taper and this rip cut. So let's start with that. I've got my 2x6 cut to length. I got a few stock blocks here. I've got a few different hold downs because my methods have changed over time. But currently I have a stock block here and I have a stock block over here. And a bunch of notes written down for this and that. So I go against that stop block, I slide it until it hits this stop block, hold it in place right there. That's a perfect taper every single time. And when that goes on there, it lines up very well. That's the taper. This little piece will get reused. I'll cut it down a little bit here, and it'll be the part of the support for the arm. The next step, with that 1.5 inch offset, that's pretty good there. So I have the taper cut, I have the rip cut. Here's my 1.5 inch offset that I can place against the board, which just ensures that the pattern remains 1.5 inches off of that edge. And you see that rip cut right there. I mark the rest of it and ease all my corners right there. So now we go to the bandsaw to finish this. there's going to be some roundovers. I used the chop saw to get it close. Just to get it close to the mark. This one I forgot to mark, but you know, we know where it is. And we're going to clean everything up on the stationary oscillating 4x24 rigid belt sander. And one thing I wanted to mention about the armrests, you can kind of see here, these two are dark, these two are lighter. Before I make any cuts on any, I cut them down to size. I know the length of the 2x6. I cut all the 2x6s to length. Before I do anything else, I find the good side and the bad side. Some of these, this one has an ugly, just from the factory, the planer dug it out. So this side is much better. So this is my A side, this is my B side. Then, once I determine A and B, I determine left and right, and I make little relationships with the boards. You can see these two. These are kind of a middle hue between this darker one and this lighter one. They have a good relationship, so I keep those together. And my point is, no matter what I'm doing with any of these, I keep them together. If I need to trim anything, I have them stacked like this. I trim and I put it down and put it down and put it down. And then I do this stack and trim and stack them. And they end up being paired up again. So they always have to remain paired. Nothing else, everything else has an A and a B. And strategically placing good sides and bad sides, these need to remain as pairs. Because if you have your arms on your chair like this, that's going to look not as good as if you have these two arms on your chair, which came from the same board. They look they go together. They're very similar. I can move them wherever I want to move them, as long as I keep them paired up. Here's another one. It's a different shade of grain, and you got to keep them together. So I've got the belt sander. It's a 40 grit paper, which works well for me. I've got my dust collection right here, and that works well also, because the belt spins this way. Everything, a good portion of the dust goes right in here and out the door. And then when I get this the way I like it, the rounded edges, I can put them against here to some degree, or against this side, but the smaller radius tends to dig in a little. Anyways, when I get it all the way I like it, put it here on this table. Take it off of this table, move it over to this table, and keep the production going. So here we go. So when I cut the armrests, when I put it in the tapering jig and cut this triangle off, the leftover portion of that triangle is right here. And I cut, so it's a long wedge, and from there I cut it 3.5 inches. So this little piece is, as you can see, is 3.5 inches. And this is about 2, just over 2. This is like 1.5 inches. So where this comes into play is as a support. If I take the armrest and turn it upside down, you have the front leg that comes into play. I think it's around here. I think it's in line with this edge. So let's call it, it's going to be roughly here. So that has a pocket hole screw driven into the armrest. And then this piece, the support, I will cover up that pocket hole screw, and actually this is going to be one of these. These are directional. As you face the chair, the pocket hole screw will be in the rear. This is the front of the chair, the pocket hole screw in the rear. So this is going to clamp into place with glue on everything, a pocket hole screw going down here, and it'll have a 2.5 inch screw coming from this side into here, and it'll be strong as an ox. It'll be glued to here, in between this joint. It'll be glued in between this joint. This will be glued in between those two. So everything becomes extremely secure. So with all that said, what I'm working on right now is sanding these. Here's a few that I've done. Instead of being a sharp turn, it's a rounded turn. And then after I get these all cleaned up on the belt sander, I'm going to take them back to the router and route this edge here. Just from here across there and stop right there. Everything else will be up against something. And then these will be finished. And here's the final armrest supports. Nice and cleaned up. Little 3/16 inch, 3/16 of an inch round over bit. Just some round this over, and it's all going to look nice. It's going to fit well. The screw's going to be on the back side, and we're moving forward. This part here will get cleaned up with the sander. It might have a little bit of a loose piece in there. It does. It's got some bark on there, but it'll clean up. And it's not in a place where I really want it, but honestly, it'll be fine. If I don't like it, I can replace it. Here's the sander here. That's not bad right there. Everything's smooth, comfortable when you put your hands on it. So that'll be it. Could that take a little bit? Maybe a little. But it would have gotten by without it. Anyway, that's what we got. We're going to carry on with this and get them all done. Okay. Here is the final set. It's installing the arms. I mentioned before, I know I didn't have a good view of it on the camera, but the routed edge stops about 3 inches from the end of the arm, and you may be able to see that a little bit better here. And I can't find the audio for this part. I think my little microphone went away. But one of the things I wanted to show after the assembly is how the front of the arm, the back of the armrest is kind of near the back of the seat support, the back support. But it doesn't, I originally talked about it being flush and in line. But the biggest concern is in the front here. And you see as I pan back and forth, the front of the armrest is perfectly in line with the front of that front seat slat, which is also perfectly in line with where my foot is, the very front of that front leg. I want those three items to line up perfectly. That's my gauge. And eventually the footrest will line up in that line also. All it really means is some straight line effects within the chair. No one's going to lay it over, or there might be a storm and they lay the chairs over. If they do, it's not hitting on one or the other, it's hitting on everything at the same time, which would be better for the chair. They could lay it over backwards or to the side, but
it's not really about protecting the chair during a storm, although it may actually do that, but it's about keeping straight lines and symmetry and some reason for where you put the armrest and where you put the foot support. Um, and that's what I wanted to show. And then there's another little aspect, as I'm talking about here. The armrest has an inch and a half offset. And as I'm placing it on top of the leg, I'm looking down and I'm trying to point to some of these parts here. The seat support itself is an inch and a half thick, and then that bottom leg or stretcher that holds the footrest, it's also an inch and a half thick. So if you line up in this position, the left edge of that bottom stretcher with the left edge of the seat support that the seat slats are screwed to, if you put the inside edge of that armrest in line with those two, then that also, I mean, that's perfectly straight. It means your arm is coming out perfectly straight from the back. And over here, uh, I will be filming in a minute, showing you a better angle. I had a poor angle earlier, but showing a better angle of gluing and installing the armrest. But you see there what I'm looking at is the stretcher to the inside of the seat support, if that lines up with the inside of the armrest, just to give everything some balance, some straight lines, some knowledge of what is a good position and what is not a good position. And as I bring the light forward to put a little light on that lower stretcher and then line the camera up, this is essentially my view as I'm installing that armrest. I'm looking at the right edge of the armrest and how it planes off with those other two points. And I'm looking between the seat slats and beyond the seat slats. So anyways, here I apply some glue to the top of the legs, and then I put a little bit in the last 3 to 4 inches of the back of the armrest, and I gently press it against the seat unit as I press it down on top of the legs. And so it's sitting on top of the legs, and there I start to look at the plane, and I look to see if the armrest needs to come forward a little or go back a little, and I fine tune that first, planing off the armrest with the face of the front seat slat and the front edge of the forward leg. I get it to where I like it, and I apply this 4-inch spring clamp to hold it in place. And also, that's a glued joint, so it starts to hold that where the armrest hits the back support. So I'm verifying I have the front in position, and now I'm going side to side to get my vertical on the side, planing up with the inside of the seat support and the inside of that lower stretcher. And I like how things are looking. So we're going to install some pocket hole screws from underneath and install the one in the front first, come to the one in the back because the spring clamp is holding the armrest in a good position. After those screws are in, I wanted to zoom in also and show you how the armrest sits on top of the legs. The plane across the two armrests is very good, actually. And if it's not this good, it needs to be trimmed up and like with a track saw or something and made flat. But the armrest sits very flat on top of each leg with full support on top of each leg, so it's a full glued contact placement. Now I'm coming around the back to drive that 3-inch screw through the back support into the rear of the armrest. and remove my clamp. And this armrest is in place, but we still need to install the armrest support. And where the support is going is directly on top of that first pocket hole screw. And it's going to be glued in on the face and on the top, and it's going to completely cover that first pocket hole screw, and it's going to have its own pocket hole screw in on the rear side, and then it's also going to have a 2.5-inch screw coming from the inside leg into the armrest with everything glued. That's going to hold very well. So I apply my glue on the top and the face of the armrest support, get it into position, and I hold it there with a trigger clamp while I fasten the 2.5-inch pocket hole screw into the armrest. So I get that screw set. Just gently, as it starts to bite into the armrest, I let off. I don't want to drive it too far. I don't want it to come up through the top of the armrest. But it's in place, and then I can move the clamp around to support the armrest support from the side while I drive that 2.5-inch screw. And this will be all done. But if I don't put some kind of clamp on there, it's going to create a gap and the glue's not going to sit right. It's not going to hold as well as it should. So the clamps come in pretty importantly to keep everything nice and tight. And now, as far as the armrest goes, this is all complete. If there's any glue squeeze out, I remove that. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. I'm not going to be too worried about it. I don't think there's too many people in my area using glue on their furniture, so I'm not going to I'm not going to get too worried about it. If I have some showing, it'll be a good thing to show people. So the armrest is complete and the armrest support is installed, and there's only one final thing, and that's this footrest to go on top of the front rest, the front section of the stretchers that stick out a little bit, and they stick out to a desired length so that there's about a 1/2 inch reveal from over the edge of the footrest, over the footrest support. And again, I plane my armrest with the front of the seat, with the front of the leg. I keep the footrest in that same plane, and everything works out perfect. And and that's basically it. Thanks for watching.